My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago my life changed in a way I never could have imagined. My grandmother passed away and left me $20 million. $20 million. But there was one condition attached to this inheritance that made my blood run cold. I could never speak to my parents again. Not a phone call, not a text message, not a letter, not even a birthday card. Complete and total silence. Forever. I was sitting in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing my work clothes that still smelled faintly like disinfectant from the hospital where I'd just finished a grueling double shift. My feet ached in my nursing shoes, my back was sore from 12 hours of being on my feet, and I had that bone-deep exhaustion that comes from managing patient care. Dealing with emergencies. Keeping people alive while running on 4 hours of sleep. I'd driven straight from County General Hospital to this downtown law office because the secretary had called me that morning saying it was urgent regarding my grandmother's estate. The lawyer, a distinguished silver-haired man named Mr. Whitmore, sat across from me behind an enormous mahogany desk that probably cost more than my annual salary. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, expensive artwork on the walls, and leather-bound books lining the shelves behind him. Everything about this place screamed old money and power, and I felt completely out of place in my wrinkled scrubs with coffee stains on the sleeve and my hair still in the messy bun I'd thrown it into 16 hours ago. Mr. Whitmore slid a thick manila folder across the desk toward me with the kind of careful, deliberate movement that told me whatever was inside would change everything. His expression was neutral, professional, but I caught something in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe. Or concern, or perhaps the weariness of a man who'd delivered difficult news too many times before. "Ms. Chen," he said quietly, his voice measured and calm. "Your grandmother left very specific instructions regarding her estate. Before we discuss the details, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you will require some time to process. There's no rush here. Take all the time you need." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for the folder. I opened it with fingers that didn't quite feel like my own, like I was watching someone else's hands move. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's handwriting, that distinctive, careful script I'd recognize anywhere, a beautiful mix of perfectly formed English letters and occasional Chinese characters when she wanted to emphasize something particularly important. Underneath the letter was a stack of legal documents so thick it made a heavy thud when I lifted it. The papers were covered in dense legal language, clauses and subclauses and whereas statements that made my head spin, but one number jumped out at me before I could even begin to process the words around it. $20 million. I stared at that number. I blinked. I looked away and looked back. It was still there. $20 million. It didn't seem real. It couldn't possibly be real. My grandmother, Po Po, had lived in a small rent-controlled apartment in Chinatown for as long as I could remember. She wore the same 3 sweaters on rotation throughout every winter. She washed and reused plastic bags until they literally fell apart in her hands. She clipped coupons from the Sunday paper religiously and shopped sales and made meals stretch for days. She'd turn off lights in rooms she wasn't using and reuse tea bags twice and save the twist ties from bread loaves. Where in the world would she have gotten $20 million? "I don't understand," I whispered, looking up at Mr. Whitmore. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow, and not quite like me. This has to be a mistake. My grandmother didn't have this kind of money. She lived in a tiny apartment. She pinched every penny. She couldn't have had $20 million. "I can assure you it's not a mistake," he said gently, folding his hands on the desk in front of him in a way that reminded me of a priest or a therapist, someone used to delivering life-changing news. "Your grandmother was an extremely savvy investor, Ms. Chen. In the early 1990s, she was advised by a close friend who worked in venture capital, a college roommate who'd gone into finance. She made several modest but very wise investments in technology companies during their early stages, companies that were just getting started, long before anyone knew they would become the giants they are today. She invested small amounts, never touched the principal, continued to live modestly, and allowed those investments to grow over 3 decades. With compound interest and the tremendous success of several of those early companies, her portfolio grew substantially, very substantially. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. My grandmother, who saved twist ties and used tea bags twice and wore shoes until they literally had holes in the soles, had been a secret millionaire this entire time? A multimillionaire? She could have lived in comfort, in luxury, could have travelled the world or bought a beautiful home, or done anything she wanted, and instead she'd chosen to live in that cramped apartment, pinching pennies, acting like every single dollar mattered desperately. Why didn't she ever... I started, but I didn't know how to finish the question. Why didn't she use it? Why didn't she tell anyone? Why did she live like she had nothing when she had everything? Use it? Tell anyone? Enjoy it? Mr. Whitmore finished for me, his voice kind and understanding. According to her instructions to me over the years we worked together, and we worked together for nearly 15 years, she had her reasons. Very specific, very deliberate reasons. Which brings us to the condition of your inheritance. That's when I started reading the letter. My grandmother's words written in her distinctive hand, dated 6 months before she died. 6 months she'd been living with this decision, knowing what she was about to do to me, knowing the impossible position she was putting me in. And she'd done it anyway because she believed it was right, because she believed I needed it, because she loved me enough to make the hard choice, even when it would hurt. My dearest Sarah, it began in English, then switched to Chinese for a few characters, my most beloved granddaughter, before returning to English. It was her habit when she wanted to emphasize something particularly important, switching between languages like she was making absolutely sure I heard her in every possible way, in both the languages of her life. If you are reading this, I am gone, and you are facing an impossible choice. I'm sorry to put this burden on you. I'm sorry to force your hand like this. But I am not sorry for giving you this choice because I believe with everything in my heart that it will set you free. Let me explain what I'm asking of you, and more importantly, why I'm asking it. Why I believe this is the greatest gift I can give you, even though it will feel like cruelty at first. The letter went on for pages and pages, single-spaced, front and back, her handwriting getting progressively smaller toward the end, as if she'd been racing to get all her thoughts down before she ran out of paper or courage or time. I read slowly, carefully, tears blurring my vision multiple times so that I had to stop and wipe my eyes and take shaking breaths before I could continue reading. She wrote about watching me grow up under my parents' roof, about seeing my parents, her son Robert and his wife Patricia, my mother, treat every single one of my accomplishments like failures because they didn't match the exact vision they had for my life. She wrote about specific moments, memories I'd half forgotten or actively tried to forget, bringing them back with painful, crystalline clarity. She wrote about the time when I was 17 and won a full scholarship to nursing school. It was a huge achievement, a full ride to one of the best nursing programs in the state. Everything paid for. Tuition, books, even a stipend for living expenses. I'd worked so incredibly hard for it. Studied for months while working part-time at a pharmacy. Volunteered at hospitals on weekends, written essay after essay, gone through multiple rounds of interviews. I was so proud when I got the acceptance letter and the scholarship notification. I'd come home bursting with excitement, practically floating, ready to celebrate what felt like the biggest achievement of my life, ready to finally have them be proud of me for once. But when I told my parents, sitting at our kitchen table with the acceptance letter in my trembling hands, my mother actually cried. Not tears of joy or pride or happiness or celebration, tears of disappointment and shame and embarrassment because I wasn't going to medical school, because I was settling for nursing instead of becoming a doctor like they'd planned, because what would the relatives think? What would the neighbours say? What would people at church whisper about? How could they possibly hold their heads up when their daughter was going to be just a nurse? My grandmother had been there that day. She'd been visiting, sitting at our kitchen table drinking chrysanthemum tea from her favourite chipped mug, and she'd witnessed the whole thing unfold like a car crash in slow motion. She'd watched my excitement drain away like water from a broken cup. She'd watched as my mother sobbed about how they'd failed as parents, how they'd raised a daughter with no ambition, no drive, no desire to be truly exceptional. She'd watched my father sit there stone-faced and silent, his disappointment radiating from him like waves of cold air. She'd watched me actually apologise, 17 years old and apologising for my achievement, for my scholarship, for my choice, for my existence. She'd watched me comfort my mother for my own success, patting her back and promising I'd work really hard in nursing school and make them proud somehow. I watched your light go out that day, my grandmother wrote, and I could see from the way the ink was slightly smudged here that she might have been crying as she wrote this part. I watched you apologise for your achievement. I watched you comfort your mother for your own success. I watched you make yourself smaller and dimmer so they could feel bigger and brighter. And I said nothing. I sat there and stayed silent because I didn't want to cause family conflict, didn't want to create problems, didn't want to make waves or stir up trouble. I regret that silence every single day. I regret it more than almost anything else in my life. She wrote about other moments she'd witnessed over the years, creating a catalogue of small cruelties and large disappointments, documenting a lifetime of conditional love. My high school graduation, where my father spent the entire ceremony on his phone dealing with some work crisis that probably wasn't actually a crisis, then lectured me afterward in the parking lot about how I'd need to work twice as hard in college to make up for choosing a state school instead of an Ivy League university, as if my choice of college was a personal failing that required compensation. My college graduation, where my mother spent the entire day comparing me unfavourably to my cousin Jennifer, who'd gotten into law school at Columbia, bringing her up in every single conversation, making sure everyone knew that while I was just finishing my nursing degree, Jennifer was going to be a lawyer at a prestigious school. Every birthday party where my accomplishments were footnotes to other people's successes. Every holiday gathering where I tried so desperately hard to share something I was proud of, only to have it dismissed or minimized or redirected to someone else's bigger, better achievements. Every family dinner where I felt myself shrinking, getting smaller, taking up less space, speaking more quietly, until sometimes I felt like I might disappear entirely and no one would even notice I was gone. I tried to talk to your father, my son, about this many times over the years, she wrote, her handwriting getting a bit shakier here, as if the memory upset her even as she put pen to paper months or years after the conversations had happened. I told him that love should not feel like a performance review, that a daughter should not have to earn her parents' approval like wages at a job, like something that must be worked for and can be withheld as punishment. That you were a good person, a caring person, a person who helped others and worked hard and deserved to be celebrated for who you were, not criticised for who you weren't. That your choice to be a nurse was noble and important and worthy of pride, not disappointment. Do you know what he told me? He said I didn't understand American culture, that I was too soft, too traditional, too old world in my thinking, that high expectations were how you made children successful in America, how you pushed them to be their best selves. That tough love was necessary, that praise would make you complacent, that if they accepted your mediocre choices, they would be enabling you to waste your potential. He actually used that word, mediocre. He called your choice to dedicate your life to helping people, to healing people, to caring for the sick and the vulnerable and the suffering, mediocre. As if there could be anything mediocre about spending your days saving lives. I had to stop reading. My vision was completely blurred with tears. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. and I felt like I might throw up. I'd never known she'd tried to defend me. I'd always assumed she agreed with them, or at least didn't care enough to get involved, or thought it wasn't her place to interfere in how her son raised his children. I'd thought I was completely alone in that family, the only one who saw something wrong with how they treated me, who felt the wrongness of their love that came with so many conditions attached. Mr. Whitmore quietly pushed a box of tissues across the desk toward me. I took several, wiped my eyes, blew my nose, tried to compose myself enough to keep reading even though my heart was pounding and my chest felt tight and I wasn't sure I could handle whatever came next. My grandmother then described in painful, excruciating detail the exact moment that made her decide to change her will, the specific incident that transformed her vague unease and general concern into concrete action. The moment that led directly to me sitting in this office, reading these words, facing this impossible choice. It was my 31st birthday dinner last year. The whole family had gathered at a restaurant, one of those family-style Chinese places with the big round tables and lazy Susans in the middle and two loud conversations happening at every table. My parents, my older brother Marcus and his wife Amanda, my younger sister Jenna, my aunt Linda and uncle Paul, my cousin Derek, a handful of other relatives, and my grandmother. We'd ordered too much food, as always, and people were talking over each other, as always, and it felt like every other family gathering I'd endured for 31 years. But this time, I'd thought things might be different. I'd been working toward a promotion at the hospital for 3 years. 3 full years of extra training, taking on additional responsibilities, proving myself over and over again. Charge nurse was a significant step up. More responsibility, better pay, leadership experience, the respect of being chosen over several other qualified candidates. It felt important. It felt like an achievement that even they couldn't dismiss or minimize. I'd waited until everyone was seated, until the first round of dishes had arrived, until there was a natural lull in the conversation. And then I'd stood up, my heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat, and made my announcement. My voice was actually shaking with a mixture of excitement and nervousness and hope. I have some good news I want to share with everyone. I was promoted to charge nurse at County General. It's a position I've been working toward for a long time, and I'm really proud of this achievement. I wanted to celebrate it with all of you. There was a brief silence, the kind of silence that feels like it stretches for hours, even though it probably lasted only a handful of seconds. Everyone's chopsticks paused mid-air. Conversations halted. All eyes turned to me, and for just a moment, I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, they'd be proud. Then my brother Marcus said, "That's great, Sarah. Congratulations," in the kind of flat, perfunctory tone you use when you're saying something because social convention requires you to say something, not because you actually mean it or care. My father nodded once, a single curt nod, said, "Good," in the same tone you might use to acknowledge that someone had remembered to buy milk, and immediately went back to examining the next dish being brought to the table as if nothing had happened. And my mother. God, my mother looked at me with this tight, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "That's nice, dear. Very nice. Good for you." Then, without missing a beat, without even taking a breath between sentences, she turned to my Aunt Linda, sitting next to her, and said in a much brighter, more animated, more genuinely enthusiastic voice, "Oh, Linda, did everyone hear your news? Derek just made partner at Paul's firm. Now that's a real achievement worth celebrating. Derek, stand up and tell everyone about your promotion. Tell them about what you'll be doing." The conversation immediately shifted, pivoting away from me like I'd never spoken at all. Everyone turned to Derek. Questions flew. Congratulations poured out. My announcement was over, forgotten, dismissed, erased, replaced in seconds by something more impressive, more worthy of celebration, more deserving of the family's attention and pride. I stood there for a moment longer, my hand still raised slightly like I might say something else, like I might protest or clarify or demand to be seen. And then I slowly sat back down. I didn't say another word for the rest of the dinner. I pushed food around my plate, smiled when I was supposed to smile, laughed when others laughed, and felt myself disappearing into my chair, getting smaller and smaller until I might as well not have been there at all. My grandmother had been sitting right next to me, close enough to hear my breathing change, close enough to see my hands clench in my lap, close enough to watch my face as everything I'd felt just seconds before, the pride, the excitement, the hope, the desperate need for their approval, drained away like someone had pulled a plug. She'd seen me swallow my disappointment like bitter medicine, the way I'd learned to do my entire life, the way I'd been trained to do since childhood. She'd seen me make myself smaller, quieter, less, so everyone else could feel bigger, louder, more. That night, she wrote, and I could see from how the ink was smudged in places that she'd definitely been crying while writing this, I went home and couldn't sleep. I laid awake until dawn thinking about your face, about how you'd looked so happy, so proud, so hopeful for exactly 10 seconds before your mother cut you down. About how this wasn't new, wasn't unusual, wasn't a one-time thing, but rather the 1,000th time I'd watched this exact pattern repeat itself. About how you were 31 years old and still desperately, pathetically seeking approval from people who would never, ever give it to you freely, who would always find someone else's achievements more worthy of celebration than yours. I realized something that night, something I should have realized years ago, but was too cowardly to face. I had failed you. I had given you my time and my love and my attention, yes. I visited with you every week, I taught you my recipes, I listened to your stories about work and life and your hopes and dreams, but I never gave you the one thing you actually needed from me, protection, protection from them, permission to walk away, a way out of the cage they'd built around you. I had enabled their treatment of you by staying silent, by trying to keep peace, by pretending that if we all just got along and didn't make waves and maintained family harmony, everything would somehow be fine. But everything was not fine. You were dying inside, slowly, a little more each year, like a plant kept in darkness, like something being starved of the light it needed to grow. And I was complicit in that death through my silence, through my cowardice, through my unwillingness to cause conflict even when conflict was desperately necessary. The letter continued for 3 more pages. She detailed her decision to create this inheritance with its impossible condition. She explained that she'd spent months researching, consulting with therapists and family counselors and Mr. Whitmore. She'd read books about family dysfunction and conditional love and emotional abuse. She'd talked for hours with her friend Martha, who'd known our family for decades and had witnessed much of what my grandmother had witnessed. She'd agonized over this decision for 2 full years, lying awake at night wondering if she was doing the right thing or being cruel, if she was helping me or hurting me, if she was being brave or vindictive. She'd revised the will 4 separate times, adding details, clarifying conditions, second-guessing herself, trying to make absolutely certain she was doing the right thing and not just being controlling in a different way, not just substituting her conditions for their condition. "This money is not a gift, Sarah," she wrote in a paragraph that was underlined twice, as if she wanted to make absolutely sure I understood this point. "It's a key. A key to unlock the cage you've been living in your entire life. Your parents love you. I do believe that, in their own broken way. But their love is conditional. It requires you to be someone you're not, someone you were never meant to be, someone who doesn't actually exist, except in their imaginations. It requires you to constantly apologize for your own existence, to minimize your own achievements, to make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger, to seek approval you will never fully receive, no matter how hard you work or how much you accomplish or how perfect you try to be. I'm not asking you to choose between money and family. You've been making that choice, choosing between yourself and their approval, for 32 years. Every time you accomplished something and they dismissed it, you had to choose. Believe in yourself or believe in their judgment. Every time you made a decision they disagreed with and they criticized you for it, you had to choose. Trust yourself or trust their disapproval. Every time you tried to share your joy with them, and they diminished it, you had to choose your happiness or their comfort. You've always chosen them, Sarah. Always. You've always chosen to believe that maybe this time, maybe with this achievement, maybe if you just worked a little harder, or accomplished a little more, or made yourself a little more perfect, they would finally see you. Finally be proud without qualifications. Finally love you unconditionally the way parents are supposed to love their children, the way I love you, the way you deserve to be loved. But my darling girl, they will never give you that. Not because you're not worthy. You are so worthy, more worthy than you can possibly imagine, but because they are fundamentally incapable of it. They love their vision of who you should be more than they love who you actually are. They love the imaginary daughter they invented more than the real daughter standing in front of them. And as long as you keep hoping they'll change, keep believing that next time will be different, keep giving them chances to hurt you, you'll keep giving them pieces of yourself until there's nothing left, until you've carved away so much of who you really are that you won't even recognize yourself anymore. So I'm giving you permission to choose yourself for once in your life. I'm giving you the financial means to build a life completely free from their judgment, their criticism, their conditional love that isn't really love at all. And yes, I'm making it a condition, an ultimatum, forcing your hand because I know you. I know your loyalty, your sense of duty, your desperate hope that somehow, someday, things will get better if you just try hard enough. I know that without this push, without forcing your hand, you would keep trying forever. You would keep setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Keep bleeding yourself dry, trying to fill their bottomless need for you to be someone you're not. The final paragraph was written in slightly larger letters, as if she'd wanted to make absolutely sure I could read it even through tears, even in the worst emotional state. 30 days feels cruel, I know. It feels like I'm rushing you, forcing you into an impossible decision without enough time to think it through properly. But Sarah, my beloved granddaughter, if you need 30 days to decide whether to keep people in your life who consistently make you feel worthless, then they've already taken too much from you. The Sarah I know, the Sarah I love. The real Sarah underneath all that people-pleasing and approval-seeking and making yourself small. She already knows the answer. She's just been too kind, too dutiful, too good, too loyal, too loving to admit it. Choose yourself, my darling. I give you permission. I give you the financial means. Now give yourself the courage. All my love, forever and always. Your Popo. I set the letter down on the desk and just sat there, crying silently, tears running down my face and dripping onto my scrubs. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my grandmother, about my own life, had just been turned inside out. I didn't sleep that night, not even close. I lay in my small bedroom staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. My grandmother's letter sat on my nightstand, and even though I couldn't see it in the dark, I could feel its presence like a weight pressing down on my chest. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision, not about the inheritance, not yet, but about what I needed to do first. I needed to test them, all of them. I needed to know the truth before I made a choice that would define the rest of my life. At 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, I called my best friend Rachel. She answered groggily. "Sarah?" "It's Saturday, are you okay?" "Rachel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I told her everything, the inheritance, the condition, my grandmother's letter, and then I told her my plan. "I'm going to test them," I said. "I'm going to tell different family members that I'm in financial trouble. Nothing about the inheritance, just that I was in a car accident, have medical bills I can't pay and need to borrow $5,000. I'll see who actually helps." There was a long silence. "Sarah, that's manipulative." "I know, but I need to know the truth. If they can't help me with $5,000 when I've never asked for anything, then my grandmother was right about them. And what if they all fail? Then I'll have my answer." Rachel sighed. Okay, but promise me you'll actually listen to the results. Don't make excuses for people who fail the test. I promise. I spent the weekend crafting my story. Car accident 3 weeks ago. Whiplash and mild concussion. Emergency room, CT scan, neurologist follow-up. Insurance covered most of it, but I was left with $5,000. 2 weeks to pay, or it goes to collections. Monday morning, I made the first call. My brother Marcus answered on the third ring. Sarah? What's up? I'm between meetings. I could hear him typing. I told him my story. Wow, that sucks, he said. The typing continued. Have you tried negotiating with billing? I did. This is after negotiation. Marcus, I need to borrow $5,000. The typing stopped. Long pause. Things are really tight right now. We just put down a deposit on a lake house. Amanda's car lease is up. The kids' private school tuition increased. I sat in my apartment where the elevator doesn't work, listening to my brother in his house with a 3-car garage tell me he couldn't spare $5,000. You just bought a lake house. That's an investment property, not liquid cash. Have you asked Mum and Dad? I hung up. In my notebook, I wrote, Marcus, no. Lake house more important. Next, I texted my sister Jenna. She responded 3 hours later. On a hike. What's up? I explained the situation. She called immediately. Oh my God, Sarah, that's terrible. Are you okay? For a moment, I felt guilty. She sounded concerned. I'm okay. Just stressed about the money. I need to borrow $5,000. Oh, Sarah, I wish I could, but I'm completely broke. I had to borrow money from Mum and Dad for groceries last week. Have you thought about a GoFundMe? I could share it on Instagram. I have like 3,200 followers. My sister wanted me to crowdfund rather than help me herself. Then she said, could you spot me $40? My car payment is due. I hung up. Jenna owed me $2,300 from previous loans she'd never repaid. Tuesday morning, I called Aunt Linda. This was the call I dreaded most. Sarah! What a lovely surprise. I explained the situation. Oh my goodness, that sounds stressful, she said in a tone that was both sympathetic and condescending. You know, this is exactly why everyone needs an emergency fund. Don't you have savings? Not enough to cover this. That's why I'm asking. Sarah, and I say this with love, this is the consequence of lifestyle choices. You chose nursing over medical school. You chose that apartment instead of moving back home. You chose that old car. These choices add up. Heat rose in my face. Aunt Linda, can you lend me $5,000, yes or no? Paul and I worked very hard for our money. We didn't get where we are by bailing people out every time they made poor decisions. What kind of lesson does that teach? The lesson that family helps family, she sighed. I'll tell you what. Send me an itemized budget. Paul and I will review it. I'm sure we can find areas where you're overspending. Cancel Netflix, start meal planning, pick up extra shifts. I work 60-hour weeks. Some people work 80. Look, I have a hair appointment in 20 minutes. Send me that budget and we'll see. But I think this is a good opportunity for you to learn financial responsibility. She hung up. I thought about her son Derek, who'd never worked anywhere except his father's company, driving a Tesla that cost more than I made in a year. Wednesday, I called Derek. He took 2 days to respond. When he finally called back Thursday evening, I could hear restaurant noise. Hey, cuz. Sorry, been crazy busy. What's up? I gave him the short version. Dude, that's rough. Healthcare costs are insane, right? That's why I'm bullish on healthcare tech disruption. Derek, I need $5,000. Can you help or not? Oh, I'm pretty leveraged right now. I just moved capital into a crypto play that's going to moon, like 50 times return, but my liquid assets are tied up. You drive a Tesla. That's leased. Business expense. Hey, have you thought about getting into crypto? I could send you resources. I need money now, Derek, not investment tips. Right, I wish I could help. Have you asked my parents? Your mother suggested I cancel Netflix. He laughed. Classic mum. Hey, our appetizers just showed up. Let me know if you want those crypto resources. He hung up. Friday afternoon, I called my parents. My mother answered and put me on speaker. Sarah, we were just talking about you. When are you coming to clear out Popo's apartment? The landlord keeps calling. My grandmother had been dead 3 weeks and they were worried about her apartment. That's not why I'm calling. I need to talk about something. I told them about the accident, the bills, the $5,000. Why didn't you tell us about the accident when it happened? My father asked, his voice sharp. I didn't want to worry you. But now it's serious enough to ask for money? My mother jumped in. Sarah, we need to discuss this. But I'm concerned. This isn't the first time you've had money troubles. What are you talking about? I've never asked you for money. You're always complaining about student loans, rent, how tired you are. These are signs of poor financial planning. If you'd gone to medical school like we said, you'd be making 3 times what you make now. I closed my eyes. So, is that a no? We need to think about it, but we're worried about enabling bad behavior. I was in a car accident. How is that bad behavior? You drive a car from 2009, my mother said. If you'd bought something newer with better safety features like we told you, maybe this wouldn't have happened. I hung up. Sunday afternoon, my father texted. Your mother and I discussed it. We can give you $2,000, but you need to pay us back with 6% interest. We'll draw up a formal loan agreement. This is important for teaching financial responsibility. Let us know. $2,000. With interest. From my parents who'd just spent $7,000 on an Alaska cruise. I didn't respond. That left one person. Martha. Martha was my mother's college friend, like an aunt my whole life. She was a retired elementary school teacher living on a pension. Asking her for $5,000 felt cruel, but I needed to complete the test. Monday morning I called her. She answered on the first ring. Sarah, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up? Her voice made my throat tight. I'm okay, Aunt Martha. Actually, I need help. Of course, dear. Anything. I told her the story. There was a pause. Maybe 3 seconds. Oh, honey? That must be scary. Are you hurt? I'm okay physically. I just don't have the money. When do you need it? 2 weeks. Okay. I can give you the money. I started crying. Sweetheart, it's okay. Martha, I can't take your money. Yes, you can. Because that's what people who love each other do. They help. No contract. No interest. No judgment. Come by tomorrow at noon. I'll make tea. When I hung up, I cried for 20 minutes. The person with the least had offered everything. The people with the most had offered nothing but conditions and criticism. I called Mr. Whitmore. This is Sarah Chen. I've made my decision. I accept the inheritance, all of it. Are you certain? I'm certain. I needed to know the truth. Now I do. Tuesday at noon, I drove to Martha's house. She pulled me into a hug. Come in. I made tea. We sat in her kitchen. She pushed an envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $5,000. Martha, I said, shaking. There's no car accident. I was testing everyone. My grandmother left me money, but only if I cut off my parents. I needed to know who my real family was. I'm so sorry. I expected anger. Instead, she took my hand. I know, sweetheart. I stared. You what? I know. Your grandmother told me about the will 6 months ago. She wanted you to figure this out yourself. You knew the whole time? When you called, I figured something was happening. But I would have given you that money even if I'd known it was a test, because that's what love is. Love shows up. Everyone else said no. My parents offered $2,000 with interest. I'm sorry you grew up with people who taught you that love has to be earned. That's not love, Sarah. Martha handed me another envelope. Your grandmother wrote this for you. She asked me to give it to you after you decided. I opened it. Inside was a short letter. My dearest Sarah, if Martha is giving you this, you've made your choice. Whatever you decided, I'm proud of you. If you chose yourself, I'm celebrating. You are enough, my darling. You always have been. All my love, Po. I cried harder. I signed the papers, I told Martha. I'm accepting the inheritance. I'm cutting them off. I thought you might. Does that make me terrible? No, honey. It makes you brave. Wednesday morning, I signed the papers. Mr. Whitmore explained my parents would be notified that afternoon. That evening, my phone exploded. 17 calls from my mother, 8 from my father. Text messages that started confused, turned angry, then desperate. I blocked every number, not with anger, with clarity. I donated $100,000 to my nursing school. I created a trust fund to pay medical debt for patients at my hospital. I bought Martha's house and put it in her name, and I kept working. Because nursing was never about pleasing my parents. It was about who I actually was. 2 months later, I saw my mother in the grocery store. She saw me too. Started walking toward me, her face showing rage and grief. I turned and walked away. Not running, just walking away from people who'd never seen me clearly. For the first time in my life, I felt free.